By this point in your measure selection process, you should have already defined the goals for your measure set, established your measure selection criteria, picked existing measure sets as your reference points, and identified your candidate measures. Having done this work, you are now ready to populate your measure selection spreadsheet. This short video is meant to provide a brief walkthrough of the spreadsheet and the data entry process. To begin, let's just quickly review the three primary uses of the spreadsheet. They are 1. To make it easier to create lists of candidate measures by automatically populating basic information about them, including the extent of alignment with the 12 key federal and national measure sets included in this tool. 2. To systematically assess the measures against your measure selection criteria to determine which measures most closely adhere to the criteria you established when starting this work. And 3. To serve as a living measure library by tracking and displaying detailed information about your measures and your measure selection process. Now let's take a quick tour of the main portion of the spreadsheet, which is located under the tab labeled Measure Selection Tool. We are going to walk through the major sections of the spreadsheet that you see here. A note of caution, the measure selection process is not for the faint of heart. Similarly, this tool is complex. However, our experience has shown that if you use this tool, it can simplify the measure selection process significantly. So let's begin with the section with the dark navy blue header in columns A through C. This section contains the information that you will use to keep track of the measures in the spreadsheet, including the measure number that you will assign to each of your measures, the measure name, and, if available, the NQF number. The next section with the bright blue header in columns D through J contains basic information about the measures you enter, including the name of the measure steward or owner, the numerical CMS identifier, a brief description of the measure, and the measure's data source. There are several other columns that are also available for you to manually enter in information that may be helpful to you. To add a measure to the spreadsheet, you should first identify the measure's NQF number and enter it into column C. If the measure is included in the measure crosswalk, the key information about the measure will automatically populate into the tool. You can see here, Assessment of Asthma Control automatically populated. You must enter a 4-digit NQF number for the automatic lookup to work properly. In other words, 0002 pulls up appropriate testing for children with pharyngitis. However, if you just type in 2 or 02, it won't work. If you are adding a measure that does not have an NQF number, or has an NQF number, but the measure is not included in the measure crosswalk, the measure's information will not automatically populate, and the information must be manually entered by typing directly into the spreadsheet. As you enter your measures into the spreadsheet, you must manually add a measure number for each measure on your list. To use the spreadsheet to assess measure alignment with local measure sets that are not included in the measure crosswalk, then you must manually add these measure sets in columns AX through BD. We will discuss the process for doing so later in this walkthrough. So moving on to the next section, the orange section, in columns K through M, this section provides space for you to take notes and track your measure selection process, deliberations, and final decisions. As you go through your measure selection process and work through the steps outlined in this tool, you can return here to record your decisions in column L, the Measure Status column. You may want to use the Rationale column, column M, to document your thinking in terms of why you chose to include and exclude specific candidate measures. So moving on to the green section, if you scroll to the right, the green section provides information about how well your measures track with your selection criteria. You can enter in your measure selection criteria using the drop-down menus in row 4. If you click on the box, an arrow will appear, and you can use that drop-down menu. You may have to zoom in first to be able to read it. You can use the drop-down menu to select your measure selection criterion. Moving across the columns as you can see here. If you have selected measure selection criteria not listed in the drop-down menus, you can add them manually by typing directly into the cells in row 4. So if we zoom back out, once we have entered all of the measures and all of your measure selection criteria, you can systematically evaluate each candidate measure against the selection criterion and add an assessment of how well it meets each selection criterion. You can make an assessment of yes, which will give you a selection criteria score of 2, no, which gives you 0 points, and somewhat, which gives you 1 point. So you can work across the spreadsheet, adding your assessments, and get an ultimate score in column in column N. There's a column available next to each active selection criterion column that provides space for you to record the rationale for each assessment. So finally, if you scroll to the right, you will come to the blue section. This section provides information about how well your measures align with both the federal and national measure sets embedded in the tool and any other state and local measure sets that you have manually entered. The first blue section, labeled Calculation, provides the primary alignment scores, while the 4 blue sections that follow provide the details of this alignment. As you will see, the scores that are provided track with the number of measure sets that each measure is included. So, for example, assessment of asthma control is included in 1 of the measure sets included in the measure crosswalk, whereas appropriate testing for children with pharyngitis is included in 4 of these measure sets. As I noted earlier, to use the spreadsheet to assess measure alignment with local measure sets that are not included in the measure crosswalk, you must manually add these measure sets. To do so, scroll over to the section labeled Commercial and State Measure Sets and begin entering the measure set name in columns AX through BD. As you add measures from these state and commercial measure sets, indicate the measure's appearance in the measure set by selecting Yes in the appropriate column. So if assessment of asthma control is contained in measure set X, type Yes. If appropriate testing for children with pharyngitis is not in it, in Measure Set X, then you can leave that blank. And you will see that this is automatically calculated in column A, T. And you will see it's also included in the column AS, which is the total alignment score for all of the measure sets included in your spreadsheet. You add set B as well, you'll see the score changes again. If you would like to see the details of which measure sets assessment of asthma control is included in, you simply scroll to the right and you can see assessment of asthma control is included in the CMMI measure set and none others. However, if you look at appropriate testing for children with pharyngitis, you can see that it's included in a number of other measure sets included in the crosswalk. We hope that you have found this brief walkthrough helpful. A detailed step-by-step written overview for using the spreadsheet is located under the Instruction Sheet tab of this spreadsheet. If you scroll down, you can see the step-by-step instructions. You may also find additional resources on the buyingvalue.org website, along with links to contact us for a short orientation phone call. Thank you very much.